So I know a bit about apples. I worked at Applebee's. My fantasy league is the Apple Bowl. I cooked apple pies at McDonald's. But this apple
What kind of phone do you have?
phone?
Yeah.
No, I don't have an Apple phone.
Okay.
That would have been good, though. But this apple is somewhat rotten in its core. The skin, to continue this metaphor, is fine, but as you bite in deeper, it's bad. And that's what we do here on the Brothers Trek About. We bite in deeper. And I'm Matt, coming to you from the past in Austin. And as always, from the city of Houston is my brother Ken. Say hello, Ken.
Hailing frequencies are open.
They sure are. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome. We are talking this week about the Apple, a interesting sort of episode here that takes an interesting premise but doesn't do a lot with it, I feel like. But hey, we're going to get into it and talk about all that and more. Any preliminary thoughts you have about this episode, Ken?
So it fits into a lot of the stuff that we've been looking at in our season and a half so far. We get a little prime directive stuff. This is the primitive culture. On the one hand, we're going to kind of admire it. On the other hand, we're going to want to leave it alone. But then we find out that there's some malevolent intelligence that's, whether it's a supercomputer or whatever's going on, running the situation. We got to shut that off because we don't let supercomputers run civilizations. That's just not right.
That's right. We find that out more and more from the Enterprise crew. That's something they don't like. Well, let me get into the behind-the-scenes stuff here real quick. Max Ehrlich wrote this episode. He had about 15 years of writing TV, including The Wild Wild West and many anthology shows. You know, all those, Outer Limits and all those shows that they had going on in the past. He wrote a script for that Shatner short-lived series where he was a lawyer, or it was about a lawyer. I don't know.
Boston Legal?
Yeah, not that one. It's for the people, don't you remember? Anyway. But Ehrlich was everything that Star Trek sought to do, a successful science fiction novelist with a substantial experience in television. He had been championed by many critics for his shows that he had put on the air. And Gene Kuhn wanted him, so that's another good reason to let's go forward with this guy. So he submits his outline for this episode. Gene Kuhn very much attaches to the idea of the Apple, of the Genesis storyline idea. The problem is that nobody else likes this outline. DC Fontana says this: we have in this piece the exact but totally unexciting duplicate of Return of the Archons. Nowhere in this piece is there any indication of how Val was built, how he took over the minds of these people. At least Archons had a creation and a purpose, and was had a creation and purpose that was given to the computer.
Here we have a conflict between good drama, good television, right? In which you see something, you can resolve it because you figure out how it works. And then on the other hand, what's likely to actually happen if you're a space traveler? You're going to show up, you're going to find some stuff, unless you're going to put down an archaeological team and you're not going to oh, we figured out this planet in 42 minutes. Great. That gives us time for a joke at the beginning and a joke at the end. Let's go. Because so on the one hand, it's satisfying to watch the episode where we figured that stuff. There's no questions. I understand. That was great. A great episode. But on the other hand, it feels realistic to visit a planet, to just go, oh, look, here we are. This is what we see. We don't understand it. It's kind of a mystery. And we're going to leave it as a mystery because we got places to go.
I don't know. I think that might be one of the things I didn't like about this episode was the, like, who is Val? Why was he built? What, we get to the end of it and you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, so we have no creation story. I mean, I'm with DC Fontana on this one.
Right.
I'm like, I don't.
Yeah, there's no satisfying narrative arc to it. There's no problem resolution, maybe a twist, and then, they deal with it. Instead, it's more like, what would really happen if our crew beams down? They'd be like, well, we saw some people with some white hair, and then we left.
Fair.
I think their skin is kind of orangish.
Yeah, it's something. Red, orange, who knows what that is.
Yes, perhaps they're using a tanner that was left behind by some previous civilization.
So Cushman, who of course wrote These Are the Voyages, season 2, the book I'm always using and getting all of my find information from, he wrote this. Kuhn wanted to leave these questions unanswered. Oh, how perfectly this fits in. Kuhn wanted to leave these questions unanswered. Val may have been a machine, but who was to say the maker of that machine was not something on par with a god? The machine, after all, could control plants and clouds and throw lightning bolts from the sky. It took care of people who lived in the garden, keeping them free of worry and disease. In return, they worshipped this machine. Yet Val is the villain. And, in a sense, a character standing in for Satan is cast as the hero. Kuhn liked the irony of this and the naughtiness. DC Fontana didn't. She basically goes on to say, hey, let's massively rewrite this story or junk it, or hey, let's just spend the money to hire somebody else to write something original, she wrote. Gene Roddenberry's message to Kuhn was, I'm afraid this is another one of those lightweight outlines, which barely contains enough urgency, jeopardy, or story for even a half-hour script. Ooh, Roddenberry coming out with the claws. The idea that Kuhn liked so much references the tragic end of Who Mourns for Adonis, which, again, is something else we've done in another show, that gods must be worshipped or they die. In this case, worship is symbolized by the service of the primitive natives to perform, in the outline, the original outline, they had to oil the machine, keep it lubricated, otherwise it would die. If the Enterprise people manage somehow to keep the primitives from rendering their necessary service for the machine will cease to function. It will die. I would strongly urge you, he's writing this memo to Ehrlich, I strongly urge you to perfectly clear in the tag that we have simply played out the Garden of Eden allegory in the great machine in the role of God and Satan being played by Kirk, which of course they do. Gene Roddenberry comes back with, yeah, okay, we get it. Neglect kills gods. Fine. Good point. Interesting. But lack of oiling doesn't. If our theme is what really is a god, then let's challenge the writer to develop that theme into a meaningful story. At the end, what have we gained? We've gotten the Enterprise back? Is that all? At the risk of being cruel, I think we must ask the writer, was this trip really necessary? Which I guess is something you and I just, talked about right now. We get at the end and it's like, okay, we saw some people with white hair. We saw some tan people. Let's move on.
So it creates this dilemma where immediately you realize that probably the most realistic version of space travel is going to be the most dramatically unsatisfying.
That's also probably true. We went to this planet. Nothing happened. We surveyed it. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that can't remember his name now. Opie Ron Howard has not made movies of the other Apollo, shots, because we went to the moon, we collected some rocks, came back.
Yes, I mean he did do a whole TV series about the Apollo landings.
Yeah, so what ends up happening is that the drama isn't in like what happens, right? It's the what were the technical problems we overcame.
Yeah, it's very true. That's very true.
It's not a story about the thing. It's a story about some other thing in which this was the end result. This was like the hat that we put on it, right? We built a rocket that was able to go to the moon and come back safely. And by the way, then we actually used it, and nothing happened when we did, except for that one time.
And then we did do that movie.
That's right, and that gets to be a movie.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you think about it, every kind of drama is going to be one of two kinds of arcs, right? You're either going to have a cool adventure where you overcome some adversary, right? Like the Enterprise incident, or Balance of Terror, or you know, probably some of the ones with the Klingons. Or you're going to have something where, you know, a character is different at the end than they were at the beginning. Even if we're going to reset them in between episodes. You know, something was learned, some great, like with the Horta, right? That's a great, you know, archy episode in which something important is learned. Everything's going to be in one of those too. But the reality of space exploration is going to be an awful lot of what we see in the first 3 minutes of a lot of episodes. We are charting star sector Alpha J7. We are.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
You know, doing this one thing. Oh, wait, we got a signal. Okay, we're going to stop that now. We're going to do this other thing.
It'll probably be more fun anyway.
Yeah.
I guess this is a fine example then of like why we don't see those mundane missions. Right, we're like, okay, what did we do? We didn't learn anything. Let's move on.
And to a certain extent, I think we just need to assume that some of this stuff that we get to see in the background, oh, we're going to bring down the geologist in this episode, but he dies in 2 minutes or something. Or he just stands around in the background while Kirk, McCoy, and Spock solve some ancient mystery. Like, why was that guy there? Other than to, like, be there. I mean, he almost gets no lines, but that's what they normally do. They bring a geologist, and he does lots of work. And lots of the times, you know, Spock and McCoy are standing around going, yeah, it's a new world. So, hey, geologist, you got the report? Okay, 10 minutes. We'll wait. Is the replicator kind of off this week? It feels kind of tastes kind of weird. I don't know.
My Vulcan tea isn't nearly as good as it usually is.
That's right. Geologist, you got a report? Okay. Well, I think we're almost done here, so. You know.
Just 60 minutes of that.
Kirk Enterprise. Prepare, beam out here in a few minutes. Okay, thanks. All right, Captain, got the report. All right, beam us up. We're out of here.
Good work, everyone.
On to the next survey planet. Yeah,
that's right. We're going to go on to mundane planet number 2.
And, you get these interesting, records that would be only interested to the most obscure interest. Like, well, we found, ample supplies of tricobalt and, mega nitrogen. And we'll be able to bring a mining team down here and make use of that stuff. And then maybe we'll have an episode where they have some kind of trouble and we have to solve it. Maybe they need girlfriends. Maybe they got a monster. I don't know. That'll be an episode.
Woo! So Ehrlich writes the first draft, comes out. Nobody loves that one either. So Kuhn then writes him, this is so funny. So Kuhn then writes him a long 21-page single-spaced letter where he gives him kind of a crash course on Star Trek, which would be a very interesting letter to read, I'm sure. Get Gene Kuhn's take on the on what Star Trek is. But in the book, he gives us this. Basically saying, we're not from Earth, we're from the United Federation of Planets. He goes on to say, we have established in earlier shows that sometimes it is very damaging to a primitive civilization. It is very damaging to a come on, primitive? Why am I having problems with this word? We have established in earlier shows that sometimes it is a very damaging to a primitive civilization to understand that we've come from a vast federation of highly advanced beings who, in every way, are thousands of years ahead of these people. This can be extremely damaging. So, we start to get the idea. The prime directive here is basically what he's writing. I also like how he wraps up the letter with saying, as I told you at the very beginning, you will never write a more difficult show in your life than Star Trek. It is immensely difficult to write. Every point has to be logically perfect. I loved all of that.
So
also, go ahead.
You think about where this will go. And of course, Next Generation takes much more seriously the idea that we're going to screw stuff up if we let them know who we are and what, that we are going to contaminate their civilization.
Well, that's what, Star Trek Nemesis? No, not Nemesis. What's the second one after First Contact? Yeah, okay, we're both good. But that movie, that's one, remember, Data is supposed to be camouflaged and then he shows up and...
Right.
So yeah, there's a whole movie based on that idea.
No. A movie. I think that's like the first 10 minutes of a movie, and then they go on to something else.
No, because then they have to go down and find Data and whatever else.
This isn't an episode, this was a movie?
Yeah, it was the second movie, though. The one where Jay Frakes shaves and him and Troy take a bath together. It's the one with the guy from Amadeus. Okay.
I'm not wearing a wig, so I don't know.
I can't even remember that guy's name. That's the problem.
Because that would unlock it for me.
Yeah, right. Everybody listening is like, you dummies, it's this movie. How do you not know this?
Yeah, so here we are, still at the beginning of the series, and this idea is out there, but it's not nearly as fully developed. And in part, I think in the interim you get some anthropological, stuff about the contamination of, in primitive societies that helps them think this stuff through. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we can just go straight back to Cook in the Pacific on his mission of exploration. Giving alcohol to the people of Tahiti.
All right, hold on. I'm still looking up that movie.
Or how about Francis Xavier, who he's the great missionary to the East. He goes to a lot of Portuguese territories, Christianizing places. He's the guy who brings Christianity to Japan. And shortly before he got there, the Portuguese had brought firearms to Japan.
Whoops.
Yeah, so the Japanese ended up by shutting everybody out, getting rid of firearms and Christianity, and remaining a closed society for the next 200 years.
So 1,000 years later, I figured out it was Star Trek Insurrection. It was that one with F. Murray Abraham. That's the guy I was thinking of.
Yeah, but that one's about meeting the Baku, the nice people who are a gazillion years old and we used to be warped, civilization people, but it got boring. And then they've got that offspring, the people who all had the phage or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They all look crazy, and they want the metaphasic radiation back, and they have to go hide in the hills.
All right, I'm crazy. I don't know. I must be conflating some things together.
That may
Let's
have
move
happened
on.
at the beginning of the movie. But...
Let's move on. All right. So in the script, the first draft, he had Ehrlich had set up, instead of just the snakehead face cave thing, he had set up the idea of it being like a building instead of just a cave opening or something. So Robert Justman So, oh wait, no, sorry. First of all, this is Gene Kuhn again. Back to Ehrlich. He says, we can't afford a building such as the one that you described in this script. Incidentally, it's going to be very interesting to find out how the audience reaction will be to the fact that Captain Kirk attempts to talk to numerous buildings in this script. I don't care how burnished a building may appear in the noonday sun. No amount of talk is ever going to convince the viewer that the building is going to say something in return.
But then it does.
Mm-hmm. So Justman, who I wrote always in rare form, I always enjoy his some of his stuff. He says, "Hey, maybe we can get Ray Walston to play the part of Akuta. Please refer to page 38. Notice the tiny electrodes behind his ear. Did the author ever write for My Favorite Martian?" Page 50. Another shot of Val. The script indicated that Val is listening. How do you show a building is listening? I'm rapidly coming to the conclusion that writing for television is the equivalent of grand larceny. I love Robert Justman. He's great.
Can't the building just nod knowingly?
Yes, looming. That's great. So taking these ideas, they just pay Ehrlich off to write the script, right? Yeah, they're like, "Hey, thank you, you're done now." So Kuhn decides he's going to write the next draft himself. DC Fontana's continuing to say, "Can we just scrap this?" But Justman throws out a few ideas to Kuhn that help fit into the final draft of the script, saying the lightning bolts, for instance, the snakehead, the thorny flowers of death. All of these things are Robert Justman ideas. So Kuhn then finishes off the script, and that becomes the final revised script.
Interestingly, making Val a snakehead inverts the original story.
Yeah.
As by the guy, in which Kirk is playing the role of Satan and like brings them out of the Garden of Eden with his temptations and whatnot. But here it's Val is the serpent who has tricked them into their ignorance.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. The snake, because the snake is technically actually Kirk.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. See, they should have made it like an ancient tree or something.
Right, exactly.
So a couple things about some of the actors that are working on the show. We got Keith Andes. He plays Akuta. Since the age of 12, he had been performing on radio. Then in the early 50s, he became billed as a leading man in Hollywood, including 1955's The Great Waltz, where he was played opposite Marilyn Monroe. He was in Clash by Night, where he was played opposite Marilyn Monroe. So that's cool.
I thought you were thinking of Jack Lemmon.
Right. On television, he regularly worked throughout the 60s and 70s, including stints on The Outer Limits, which he did an episode with James Doohan, which is funny. Then we got Celeste Yarnall, who plays Yeoman Martha Langdon. When she was 19 years old, this is the second girl, by the way, on Star Trek who had became the Miss Rheingold, if you remember discussing that before. But she was the final Miss Rheingold, ending the 20-year tradition of that. So she was 19 when she won that, but she was 23 when she did this episode.
No wonder the quality of acting has declined so dramatically in Hollywood. They no longer have Miss Rheingold to draw from.
You're so right. Jeez. So she has this to say about going on to Star Trek. She said, "When my agent suggested doing a guest star role on Star Trek, I was told that the casting agent, Joe D'Agosta, was looking for something really exciting for me, and that Gene Roddenberry was one of the ones who really wanted me to do the show." Surprise. When I came in to learn about this role, it was discussed, well, do we want to use Celeste for something more exotic or something where we can really do her up well? And they asked, "Celeste, do you want to do this episode or do you want to wait for something else?" She said, "Well, in television, you always worry about the axe falling on a series, and so you want to take the work when you can get it. The something bigger may never come." And working with an actor the quality of Bill Shatner was appealing to me. I mean, his take on the brothers Karamazov was amazing. He was a very good actor. And in the script, I get to carry a weapon. I'm in a fight scene. I'm the romantic interest of Chekhov. And I'm the sex education teacher of that planet. So, of course, I wanted to do it. She's really funny. And some of the quotes in the book from her are awesome. So then we have that, the couple at the native couple at the end who are the ones who kiss. That's actually David Soul from Starsky and Hutch. Many years before, obviously. After 3 episodes, Chekhov is back, sans his wig. His own hair was long enough now. We also get Lieutenant Kyle in this episode, as you may have saw. He plays the navigator in this episode, not just stuck in transporter room. So Jay Jones, he was the one who played Ensign Mallory. He's the guy who gets blown up by the highly combustible rock. He also played Jackson the Red Shirt, who drops dead in the transporter room at the beginning of Cat's Paw. And he often did many stunts standing in for old Jimmy Doo in there. Ooh, one more interesting little thing here. When Celeste went to have her fitting, she had just gotten back from London. And so she gets in there and she says, I think we could do this mini skirt just a little bit minier. I just got back from Europe and all the girls there are winning their mini skirts a little bit shorter. So, of course, Bill Thies said, yeah, hey, let's go shorter. That'll be fun. And another lady was like, oh, well, don't we want to save that dress in case she comes back? Turns out that was old Yeoman Rand's suit that she's wearing in this episode. And Bill Thies was like, from what I've heard, she's not coming back.
Well, it turns out she did come back, just much, much later.
Many, many years later.
We'll have all new costumes by that time.
So I don't know if you remember this, but in Arena, Shatner and Nimoy had an explosion went off too near them, and they both got tinnitus from that episode. Well, guess what? This episode didn't help because there's a moment when Spock throws the rock down and it explodes. They used TNT on set that close to the actors. I know, exactly. That's my look too. What? So Cushman says, if you look in this episode, when Shatner puts his hands up to his ears, when the concussion hits and the 3 stars nearly fall over.
Oh, man.
You're looking really close to that. And the problem is that this explosion then worsened Shatner's tinnitus. Yeah. So it got worse because of this one. So way to go, effects guys.
Yeah, you got to dial back the pyrotechnics.
Yeah, and even DeForest Kelly said, right. Another, as we said in Arena, another bonus for CGI. We don't have to do the explosion right next to our our heroes.
And the thing is you could, with CGI, you could have an explosion that doesn't look like, basically a gunpowder explosion, right?
Yeah.
You can have an explosion that like has weird, phasey things coming off it and weird lights and sparkles and whatever you could think of. The explosion could look like that.
As we see at the end of this episode. Rainbows and unicorns.
Doesn't have to be just like fire. Boom. Wow.
If you remember at the end of this episode when they blow up Val's cave, there's like a sparkler or something in helping blow it up. They didn't even blow up that set. They just used a sparkler to blow it up. And lighting effects. DeForest Kelly also said that he too got a slight case of tinnitus from this episode as well. He said even 2 decades later, he was still reminded of this episode thanks to that explosion. So Jay Jones, who was just the stuntman I was talking about, said...
And apparently they don't like handout hearing protection either.
Yeah, actually, Celeste mentions that too. She's like, they didn't even give us cotton for our ears or anything. You think they would have learned their lesson from Marina?
Or, like, how long have they been doing this? You think there's got to be, like, movies from the 20s where they were like, you know what, using the real thing turns out to be a problem for the actors. Let's come up with something, like shaking those big sheets of metal for thunder. We got to come up with something like that.
Yeah.
It looks good, doesn't make a noise. We actually have to add the sound in post.
So Jay Jones, who I was just talking about, the stuntman, he said, I had to lobby director Joseph Pibney for that scene. He was a dear man and refused to let me do it. He felt it was too dangerous, but I held out. I'm saying I don't want this stunt the Mickey Mouse way, he said. So Joseph Pibney decided to do it. Well, I was wrong. I totally got hurt. There was a jumper trampoline buried in the ground, and when I hit the trampoline, the explosion was supposed to go off. Well, the timing had to be perfect, but it wasn't. The special effects guy was like 100th of a second too late. I was directly over it when the blast hit. In the episode, you can see me. I literally get blown toward the camera. The force hit me in my stomach, burned my side, blew off skin on my rib cage, and impacted all of this dirt into my sinuses. I couldn't open my eyes or breathe. They rushed me to the hospital emergency room. Dun, dun, dun. He goes, there's another take from a different camera on that episode where it just looked like I got a huge fireball, and they wanted to use that, but the NBC censors wouldn't let them.
Well, we accidentally heard him. Let's at least use the footage.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And that's it. I've got on behind the scenes stuff. I guess, as always, it's time to get to it.
Captain's log. Stardate.
It's 5-year mission.
So the Star Trek fanfares opens up on this one. Dun 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 dun. The Enterprise is orbiting a planet, but we don't go into the ship. We go right to that planet. We see Kirk, Chekhov, and 3 red shirts we don't know. 1 female, played by Celeste. Then they're followed by 2 more red shirts and McCoy. McCoy, after saying he wants to move in. It's a really pretty place. It's Eden. He follows it up with, but it's a shame that we have to intrude. After saying, hey, I want to move here, but I'm sorry, we got to break up this great place. But I'm going to do it. Kirk says that the last scout ship reported strange readings. We just got to do what we're told, he says. Chekhov says it reminds him of home. Eden, says Bones. It's more like Eden. Yes, Eden. It was just outside of Moscow. Oh, Chekhov, you crazy man. Kirk mutters, oh, yeah, outside Moscow, huh? And then goes back to, commanding the troops. Then suddenly this plant turns towards a red shirt and is instantly killed by it. Oh, my gosh. Kirk is immediately pissed. Is this paradise? He says. Actually, I think that I wrote that, and I think that that's actually a better line than whatever it was he said. It's funny because when you're turning out these scripts, especially for these guys who are, like Gene Kuhn, who cranks them out in 1 week or whatever, sometimes you just don't get the best wording of a line, the best.
Right.
Actually, the best example I have of this is in the original X-Men movie, X-Men 1. So I'm listening to the commentary. It's this great moment that happens in the commentary where they're all sitting around and Storm is creating the storm and she's fighting Toad. And then all of a sudden, she starts conjuring up all this lightning. And she says to Toad, do you know what happens when you kill a toad? She summons the thing and then says, it dies like everything else. And then you hear one of the producers go, I never know why you guys didn't ever say it croaks. And you just hear everybody else in the room go silent for a second, all like, where were you 3 months ago? You're just like, yep, exactly. It's the worst. You're like, somebody else comes up with the perfect line and you're like, oh, now you come up with that line. Great. So we got the opening credits, then we come back to it. Captain's log, stardate 3715.3. Scotty informs Kirk that suddenly they're losing a bit of something in the antimatter pods. So we hear a lot about these antimatter pods, right? This is become the new standard of whatever's helping run the engine.
Right.
I guess there are 2 pods connected to the antimatter. But anyway, the antimatter pod unit. And it may be called...
elaborate on this, and so you'll have an antimatter pod and a matter pod, and they're shooting, particles, very small amounts of matter and antimatter at each other. And then in the Next Generation, we see that vertical thing with the light, and that's where they're interacting.
Ah, gotcha. Other than the long hallway that's behind that grate in the original series, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know
exactly. I don't know.
I think it's storage. You just got boxes down there, barrels.
It's it's just a bunch of barrels of
Scotch.
Yes, that's what it is. So they're losing something in the antimatter pods, and it may be caused by the planet's strange electromagnetic atmosphere. Which I was wondering then, wouldn't that cause interference on the transporter? I feel like that's a thing where the transporter, maybe not. Spock then tells...
Maybe they compensated and didn't tell us.
Oh.
So, in the beam down, which we didn't get to see because they start in the thing. They're like, whoa, got some strange interference in the planet's surface. Compensating. All right, we're ready, sir. All right, beam us down. Woo!
I know that...
Slightly longer beam down with some extra sparkle effects, and then we're good.
I mean, I know that that's an extra set that they would have had to shoot on, but at least that would have given us like a little, and that would have set up the electromagnetic, atmosphere as well.
Right. Mm-hmm. And for a while, they could have been thinking it was a natural phenomenon rather than, well.
Spock then tells Kirk there's some sort of subsurface vibrations, and it's being artificially produced. And then we get this musical sting. So I guess that's important to remember that there's that musical vibration going on. Dun dun. Kirk then sends a recon team up ahead to scout out the humanoid village, but make no contact. Just report back to me. Spock then uses the tricorder and senses that there's a humanoid hiding behind the bush. And he's crazy agile. Chekhov then decides to make a move on the female red shirt. Kirk comes back on saying, I know you two are interested in each other, but we're not here to do field research on human biology. And after all, I mean, who's this guy to talk? Let's be honest. They then move out. We're going to move out. Formation Alpha, which is apparently just a straight line. They then find a colorful rock that Spock breaks in half while doing a casual examination of it. He then tosses one half of it aside, and boom, it explodes. That was the explosion we were talking about before. Kirk says, be careful where you throw your rock. So that was a fun line, too. The Garden of Eden with landmines.
That's right,
says Kirk. Back on the ship, Scotty then calls down to say that the antimatter pods are now inert. Some kind of beam caused them to be this way. Spock then sees a plant turning towards Kirk, and he rushes and he pushes Kirk out of the way, but instead, boom, gets himself killed. Spock's dead. And you thought that this only happened during the third movie. Bones gives him a hypo, but it doesn't seem to work. But maybe he's not dead. Maybe he's just very unconscious. Kirk then calls for Scotty to beam him up, but they can't get him off the planet. Something is inhibiting it. Close on Scott. Then close on Kirk as we go to commercial. Back at it.
Close on Scott. Close on Kirk. Close on Duncan Hines.
Oh, so you're saying Kirk was just really hungry, is what you're saying.
He'd like a cake.
Exactly. Scotty continues to investigate what's happening to the ship and why it's become so crazy. Spock then sits up. Out of nowhere, Kirk asks him to explain himself. What was he doing? Spock says, hey, I was just trying to get you out of the way. I was just too clumsy to get myself out of the way. Kirk says, well, next time yell. I can step out of the way just as quickly as the next man. And then he goes, do you know how... And then Kirk says, Do you know how much Starfleet has invested in you? And Spock starts to answer, 122,200. Well, okay, yeah. What was he going to answer? In money and credits? I thought there were no credits in the future.
But there's always time.
There's always time.
Which is why if you really want to figure out what things are worth in radically different tech levels, you use time. How long does it take to get a nail?
What?
How long does it take to get a nail?
Like to make one?
Yeah. I mean, if I need a nail, I'm going to hang this picture. I need a nail. So, and you're like, well, I have to make a 3-day trip to the blacksmith, and he'll spend half a day making my nail. And part of that time would be he's like heating up the kiln. If I get my nail, I come back, it's 3 days, and I can hang my picture. But for us, it'd be like, getting nails. And then for them, it's like, replicator, nail, 12 penny, please. I have a nail.
So suddenly the weather turns dark. Clouds roll in. Lightning. And then we lose another red shirt as he's struck by lightning. That's 2 already. Storm quickly passes. Does it pass because we got rid of one of the crew members? We don't know! Mallory calls in, but Kirk can't hear it. There's static in the way. It's a primitive society, we hear. But that's all we get. But he also gets the coordinates out, and Kirk and the rest of the crew double time it to Mallory's position. Then we see Mallory. He's running for something. And then he steps on that rock and he blows up. Oh, no! Kirk is sad. Kirk knows the family. His father helped him get into the academy. Kirk, ever the captain, blames himself. Spock assures him that it's something that he couldn't have prevented. It's all part of the mission. It's not even that important a mission to lose 3 of my men, says Kirk.
Yeah, so this is a problem, right? So in our setup between like good drama and realistic stuff, it's realistic that like you go down to like just do a regular survey, and a series of mishaps or unexpected interactions with the local geology, fauna, flora, whatever, and you got 3 dead crewmen. And you're like, this is all we're here to do is a stupid survey.
Right.
This is messed up. But that's realistic. But people dying, of course, is dramatic. It can, of course, lead to the thing where in post, like years later, fridge logic is like after the show you think about it and you're like, wait a minute. So this is like, I don't know, years later, when you think of Star Trek as a whole, you're like, boy, those red shirts, they drop like flies, right?
4 of them in this episode.
Yeah, and what they're trying to do, of course, is establish that we went to a dangerous place. A place that was not only naturally dangerous, as the unknown ought to be, right?
Right.
I mean, you think about Columbus, you think about the Mayflower, you think about Jamestown. People show up and they drop like flies, right? Because they're food. They have food problems. They have disease problems. They have supply problems of every kind. And it would likely be the same, for these guys, right? But of course, that creates this impression that, like, I think I explained it last week. The red shirt beams down, dies. Red shirt beams down, dies. We got drama. We got realism.
Spock notices the native is back. Kirk has a plan to catch him. So then, as a distraction, Spock and Chekhov have a little fight here, which is really funny, where Chekhov is like back-talking Spock. It's really cute. Then Kirk catches the native and punches him. And do you know what the native does? He cries. Kirk promises he won't hit him again. But you struck me, says the alien. In English, by the way. I guess Val taught him English. I guess that's what we're getting at.
Or we're back to a conflict between realism and drama.
Right.
Because it plays out much less funny if he's like, mushroom clip.
Kirk asks who he is. He says, I am the Eye of Val. Everything he sees, Val sees. But he has a name. His name is Akuta. Kirk wants to speak to Val. But Akuta says, no one speaks to Val but me. Then Spock notices that Akuta has an antennae growing out of his head, hairline, something. Akuta tells us that Val put them there so that he can understand his commands. Akuta says he will take them to the people of Val. Then Scotty calls down. Something like a tractor beam has caught the Enterprise, and they're starting to lose orbit. Oh no! Kirk gives 3 suggestions, all of which Scotty, of course, has already tried. That's Scotty. He's so smart. To counteract the tractor beam, Scotty puts the impulse engines on full power, but there's only 16 hours before we burn up for sure. Dun, dun, dun. We have another one of those episodes that we've seen a couple of times, right? Where something bad is happening on the planet, something bad is happening on the ship, and Kirk must solve whatever's going on the planet to also save the ship. Now we got the ticking clock, 16 hours. Tick, 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 tick.
Now, we have a small problem.
Okay, hit me.
So, any kind of thing that's going to interact over distance, you're typically going to get some kind of square law involved, right? Mm-hmm. So, light dissipates in 3 dimensions. So that's actually a cube problem, right? Gravity interacts in linear distance. That's a square problem. So this beam, in order to normally, they say this in Star Trek, right? So tractor beams are like, you got to get close. You're basically manipulating things right outside the ship, right? You can try to get something that's further away. And of course, even in that early episode with Mudd, he's trying to extend the shields out at such a range that he's like blowing, what were they? Lithium circuits, left and right. So this planet must be using an enormous amount of power to successfully hold a tractor beam on the Enterprise so that a thing that could go to warp speed, it's got that much power, is like held and like, oh, there's something we can do.
Well, it is both eating away at the antimatter pods as well as, ultimately it's expending energy that's going to be its downfall. So in that respect, it's a good setup for the end of the episode.
Yeah, lots of Star Trek involves energy management problems. When Apollo is holding the ship, well, it's got to like tire him out. Notice that when he casts in a lightning bolts at us, he's exhausted and then he leaves. He must have to recharge his batteries. And then they come up with a plan to attack him. It's an energy management problem. We get lots of those in Star Trek.
Which, as you say, is very important in many of the games, right? That's right. Energy management.
So in Starfleet Battles, which is kind of one of the first classic Star Trek games, you have boxes, that you tick off as you expended energy.
So because of this information he gets from Scotty, Kirk demands to talk to Val again. And this time, for some reason, Akuta consents. Maybe he will speak to you, but he will not speak to you. He will only speak to me, says Akuta. They find themselves in the next scene standing in front of a cave opening, and the opening is shaved like a snake, fangs and all. Red light and smoke emanate from its mouth. Commercial. Back at it. Stardate 3715.6. Spock scans the opening. The center seems to be further into the mouth. Spock attempts to step closer to take more readings, only to be thrown aside by some sort of force field. Akuta tells us that they may be able to speak with Vol when he's hungry. They can only hope. So Akuta then takes him to the village. More red aliens are here, also with platinum hair. Kirk asks, where are the others? The children. Akuta says, the replacements? Oh, they are not needed, he says. The female redshirt then asks about love. Oh, the touching and the holding. Which I thought was like, why isn't that just in the perfect Jerry Lewis voice, right? Oh, the touching and the holding. No,
And the
forbidden is
holding and
that.
the touching. Touching and the holding and the holding and the touching.
Exactly. To which Bones replies to the lack of holding and touching as, well, so much for paradise, says Bones. This is also continuing the metaphor of the Garden of Eden, right? No touching, no holding, no touching, no kissing, no sexy time.
I don't know. I think you're reading some kind of Victorian book of Genesis.
The ladies of the tribe then give them flowers.
Uh-huh.
Kirk says to Spock, it really does something for you. And Spock goes, yes, it makes me uncomfortable. It's funny. Spock has a lot of like actually funny lines in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty great. Akuta gives them a house and says there'll be more food and drink on the way. Kirk then checks in with Scotty. They devise a plan to put every ounce of energy that they can from the ship and put it into impulse power. Do whatever you can, even if it means shedding the nacelles, he says. That's interesting. That's a new thing we didn't know that they could do, is just drop the nacelles at the drop of a hat.
Well, so
However,
the original design was that you were supposed to have saucer separation, right, from the beginning. And it was too expensive. They couldn't build the model.
I was going to say, that's my next note, actually. So the episode's original script called for emergency saucer separation. But as you said, because the budget, they couldn't do it.
Yeah, so they very cleverly built it into the first episode of Next Generation. So once they had it...
Yep, they could always use it.
That's right.
Bones then enters the tent, having given an examination to the natives. And he says, put simply, they are not getting old. Hence, the no need for children. There isn't even any of that important bacteria in their bodies. Spock says this ties all into his analysis, that the atmosphere negates all effects from the sun. Then, we hear a chime. Kirk and Spock follow the natives as they go to Vol. And they are feeding it energy. Somehow with flowers. Somehow the computer is converting energy from flowers. Okay.
You need
Kirk and Spock then... That's right. They must have some kind of chlorophyll.
The biomass.
Yeah, who knows where this computer's from, so maybe that's possible. Kirk and Spock then realize that the computer must have some kind of AI in it. Now, how did they lead to this deduction? There's no way to actually know that there's a computer involved. This could be some sort of like, I mean, I guess everything in the Star Trek universe is based on a computer. I guess that's kind of it. I mean, so like, what else is there can't be an actual like god or something controlling the weather and whatnot.
Well, yeah, of course not. That would be silly. That's not how Star Trek works.
Then
all our explanations are naturalistic. There will be no supernatural explanations.
Right. So it's got to be a computer. Kirk then asks Spock to do some calculations to see how much energy Vol must be expending to keep pulling at the Enterprise. Clever. A little later, Bones joins them. He and Spock argue over the rights of the humanoids. Bones saying that they have a right to be unchained and untethered, while Spock says it is their right to live as they see fit. Bones pleads his case to Kirk. These people aren't growing. They aren't changing. They aren't evolving. Oh, so this connects to Errand of Mercy, which is the episode that I just released this last week. But it connects. We talked about the stagnating people, right? Errand of Mercy. We also talk about a Return of the Archons. Same thing. An idea where the people are not evolving, although they had their own reason in that one. We find out at the end. Spock goes on to say, but they are healthy and they are happy and it works for them. Before Kirk needs to come up with an answer, Scotty calls again. We find out that the power has been draining from the planet. So whatever's been affecting the pod is also coming from the planet. Back in their hut, the yeoman, we finally discovered that she's a yeoman, not just some kind of like female security red shirt, is worried about the ship crashing. Kirk says, that hasn't happened yet. Take a seat. Eat something. Kirk and the yeoman and Spock all postulate that if what it would mean if one of the natives were to perish. How would they balance? How would they create a new thing? And even the yeoman wonders if they could even discover sex without ever mentioning the word sex. So Celeste Yarnall has this to say about that. Is that at the time of the filming of this scene, the standards and practices were on set, and she said they were really concerned. They didn't want it to be thought. First of all, they didn't want it to be thought that I was spending too much time in this hut with these 4 or 5 men. So that's the first thing. But then it was explained to them by the producers that, hey, this is the 23rd century. Both men and women are equal. There's no reason for the concern. But it didn't matter because this is not the 23rd century. This is 1967. And this is American TV. So they had to make some changes. And some good moments were unfortunately left on the cutting room floor.
It's weird, though. You'd think, so you've got a group of people, right? And she's just one member of the crew. And what they're talking about, especially when it's things like the energy that the Val must be expending to get the ship and social development. And yeah, there's this one piece of their development that or their biology that you're curious about that may be a little bit salacious. But it'd be way, way weirder to have like one man and one woman in this hut for a long time and like you don't know what they're doing. Right? I mean,
depends on where your brain goes, man.
Yeah, so having a bunch of people sit around and discuss physics, right? Which you got a large group of mixed company, seems to be like the most unobjectionable thing.
Fair. So Kirk then hands the floor over to Mr. Spock, saying, "You're the science officer. Why don't you explain it to the young lady?" Which, of course, Mr. Spock is then uncomfortable to do. And then and then he's like, well, maybe the computer will teach them how to do it. To which Bones is like, yeah, that'd be great. Let's have a computer teach them all about sex. Great. But I'm even less worried about the sex. I'm more worried about, like, what about the actual, like, birthing process? I think that the natives would have a lot more trouble with that than they would figuring out the sex, because that's the easy part.
So it would depend on whether or not, like humans, they ended up with a much larger brain than is easy to birth. So, like chimpanzees have, very easy birthing because their heads aren't so big.
We then see Val talking to Akuda. And all Akuda says, I promise that it will be done. Oh, something in the making here. Then we finally get this little, like, love scene-ish between Chekhov and the yeoman. Hints of it were all along in the episode, and now we finally get the payoff here as they finally kiss and make out. And we see some natives skulking around in the background. Then the natives discuss it. Why do they do it? It is not a dance. It does not serve all. But it did seem pleasant.
How do you know it doesn't serve all?
Well, Val says that they're not allowed to do it, so I guess it doesn't.
Oh, so it's forbidden.
Yes.
Because otherwise, all you'd really know is that Val hasn't asked for it.
Good point. Good point.
If Val, though, with most things, once Val says no kissing, you're gonna get kissing, right?
Right, I guess.
I mean, part of the whole thing of the apple itself is like, do not eat from the tree of knowledge. Oh man, I totally want to know what's going on with the tree of knowledge now. What does that fruit taste like? What happens when you eat it? Oh man. And of course, some of the warnings, like you will know the nature of good and evil. Yeah, I don't see the downside. It's almost like we would gain, like, we'd be fully conscious beings. And in a sense, that's the problem here, right? Is that, so you get a really good argument from a Spock about let's leave them alone. Everything seems, cool here. Let's just not interfere, right? And then the counter argument is these people are being herded, right? They're being treated like a herd. They're being managed by Vol for what reason we don't know.
Well, to keep him going. There's nothing
bring
else.
Him flowers, apparently, right?
Yeah. To eat.
Yeah, I mean, it just could be like they are so unproductive. They can't be distracted by anything, or they won't bring me enough flowers. So just keep bringing the flowers. Nothing else. Nothing. No distractions. No cultural inventions. No sex. Nothing that will distract you from bringing me as many flowers as possible, because they are so resource poor. These flowers. I got huge energy needs, people.
Especially right now.
Yeah. I've been saving up for this for like decades. So you get this problem, right, of on the one hand, they're happy, right? On the other hand, they're a herd. They're managed. They're not free. They're not. They should be sentient. They have the capacity to be sentient, but they're not. They're like going to see dolphins at the, at a park, and you're like, oh look, the dolphin catches a ball, it gets a fish. Oh look, the dolphin, and you're like, the dolphin seems like he'd be much happier not in this environment, right? It makes us sad. Or killer whales is another one, right? Killer whales don't last a long time in the parks. And so you have this desire, let's free them, let's liberate them. And to do that, one of the things we have to give them is consciousness. And to do that, you have to eat the apple.
Yeah.
You cannot be the naive, oh, look, we're in Eden and everything is provided for us. We don't know good and evil. We don't realize we're naked.
Right.
We don't know what's wrong about stuff until we eat the apple. You gotta eat the apple. And of course, that would be a very Star Trek point of view, right? Is that you got to eat the apple.
That's how it ends up.
We haven't gotten to it yet, but of course, we're going to get. I can't remember the name of the episode where Kirk gets split into two, right?
Yeah, Mirror, Mirror.
Mirror, Mirror.
Which is funny because by the time this episode airs, that has already aired.
Uh-huh.
And
the necessity. You got to eat the apple. You got to have the good and the bad, because Kirk, without his evil side, is a weak and ineffective captain. Stagnating.
That's right.
Although probably tend to bring flowers to Vol.
Right. So the natives attempt to kiss, and not surprisingly, they like it. So they keep doing it. Okuta then catches them. Vol speaks to him and tells him that the men of Vol must meet with him after the strangers are asleep. And then they meet. Okuta tells them we are to kill the strangers. But they don't understand. Kill? What's that? Okuta says, Vol has explained it to me. And then he explains to them by killing a melon.
A melon?
A melon. Of some kind. Commercial.
Yeah, okay. He doesn't mean kill, he means smash.
Well.
He'd have to kill something that was like scampering around and moving, and then he smashes it, and I was like, look, it doesn't move anymore. It doesn't scamper. It does not infect us with bad ideas.
I was just trying to be funny.
Yeah. Smashing a melon, not killing a melon.
Here has been the problem with you and I growing up. I'm just trying to be funny, and then you explain it. I'm like, well, that's not funny anymore. So anyway, here's an interesting thought. 12 minutes left of this episode, right? And we have a lot to wrap up. We got
I'm thinking at this point, we got to find out what the computer is, right? I'm also thinking we got to find out how it got there. I just thought that those were going to be natural things that were going to be explained in this episode, but apparently they're not. We also have to know what will happen to the natives, whether the ship will be okay. And so it's funny. We have all of this stuff that has to be wrapped up in 15 minutes, especially for me, what's the computer, how it got there. Wouldn't that have been interesting to find out? But yet, we spent 15 minutes in the first half of this episode, with plants that kill red shirts. You know what I mean? So it's interesting that it's like, how can we, there's a better way to set up this thing, which is funny because go ahead.
We make it a 2-part episode.
I almost mentioned that earlier. I was like, see, so this is another one of those episodes for you where had we had, episodic television, it would have worked out better.
That's right. So the episode 1 would be about going to, our mission, exploring strange new worlds, seeking out new life and new civilization. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
We don't know what's out there. We get surprised, caught off guard by things that we didn't know were dangerous. And then episode 2 would be about fall.
So it's funny I mentioned all of that because here's what DC Fontana had to say about this episode. The story structure here is bad. We are at the end of Act 2 before we even meet Vol, who's our heavy. There's no decisive action on the part of our principals. We lose the ship for long periods of time, and nothing's happening up there anyway. There's no sense of jeopardy or urgency about these people's predicament, and the resolution is far too easily and contrived. Recommend a total rewrite and restructure. Okay, well, that's pretty much how I felt about it, too. I'm just like, we're wasting 15 minutes on, plants that kill when we could be like discovering the secret of all or, anything like that. You could still keep Gene Kuhn's ideas of, what this story is supposed to be about, the Genesis story and all of that. But anyway, sorry. So let's go. Kirk and Spock are back in their hut. Everyone else is sleeping. Kirk says Bones was right. These people are just existing. But Spock says, how do we then break the Prime Directive? Which also connects us to Errand of Mercy, which I just, released. Because we both, I was like, doesn't this violate the Prime Directive? And you were like, I don't know if we've even gotten to the Prime Directive yet.
Plus, those guys were Federation people, weren't they?
No, Errand of Mercy is the glowy people. The people who are like, it's the fight between Core and...
the Organians. Yeah, I was thinking of the Paradise Syndrome.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so as you were making all your references, I was imagining people with spores. And they're like, oh, now I'm totally content.
Yeah, no, not that one.
Because I was focused on the contentment of your pre-Edonic state, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, good thought. I was thinking about the Organians before we know that they're like supernatural godlike people, how like we think that their civilization is like, stuck and they haven't changed in 10,000 years and blah, blah, blah.
Or they just become beings of light and they just don't bother to change the setting.
Right.
Because we don't use it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
In a room that you never use, That's the room where we become physical beings. The rest of the house, we're all luminescent.
Doesn't matter. But anyway, Spock talks to the Prime Directive, and I was thinking, haven't them just being here violated the Prime Directive already? I mean, we got the natives kissing each other, learning about death. I mean, this is
contamination.
Prime Directive's already exactly contamination. Perfect word. So then Kirk then mentions one of the things that you say is like the stanchions of Star Trek, freedom of choice, the right to do what, they want, agency, all of these things is pretty much what Kirk comes back with. He basically agrees with McCoy. Kirk then checks in with Scott. Scott says he needs about a half an hour. He needs about a half an hour to get the ship on full impulse power going. Kirk points out that in 45 minutes, the ship will be pulled into the atmosphere. And Scott says, I know, I'm cutting things close. Oh, there we go with the Irish again. Anyway, Spock returns from a quick look around and finds that all the people are gone. Where are they at? So Kirk decides he's going to take this message right to Vol. We come in peace, but then the storm clouds gather. Scott tells us that There is a strong jump in the wavelengths. That's what he says. I wrote that exactly. But it's like, what does that mean? There's a strong jump in the wavelengths. Anyway, so Val's eyes glow, and the lightning attacks. Spock is knocked out again, and Kirk carries him off. Back in the village, Bones diagnoses Spock with second-degree burns. And then the village attacks. They kill the last red shirt, and then they come after the rest, and more villagers flood into the scene. But even though they are equipped with these fancy bonk-bonk weapons,
Bonk, bonk.
bonk-bonk,
They
unfortunately...
That's a different episode altogether.
That is a different episode altogether. They are not ready to take on a fully trained Federation crew who knows how to fight, right? Kirk and Spock get a few licks in, as does the female yeoman, who kicks and punches a few of the male villagers, and then it's all over. The villagers are all lying dead. Kirk sends the natives to the hut to be secured. And then Spock comes at us with a moral. The good doctor seems to be concerned as to whether or not the Valians have attained true human stature. I submit there's no cause for worry. They have taken their first step. They have learned to kill. Aboard the ship, Scotty has done it. They have put the ship into the reverse, and it starts to work. They're pulling away. But all of a sudden, all of the systems crash. It doesn't work. Kirk laments what he guesses will be the death of 400 people. Again, pulling the captain's thing. I should have seen the warning signs. Orders. Always following orders. Suddenly, the dinner bell rings, and the Valians try to head out to feed Vol.
You have the key lesson for Kirk, right? This is his little arc, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because his lesson is don't follow orders. Follow your gut, do what you think is right, right? And so when we see the Kirk of the movie era, who's just like off the rails all the time, right? He's just doing whatever he wants.
Yeah.
It's stuff like this that gets him there. Because season 1, he's very much a kind of follow orders kind of guy, right? I mean, he may know how to work within that world to like do things different than he was told, but he is not the kind of movie era just whatever. And it's stuff like this that brings about his big change.
Suddenly, the dinner bell rings, and the Valians head out to feed Vol. But Chekhov stops them, and Kirk realizes this is the answer. Do not let them feed Vol. Don't let anyone feed Vol. He then calls up to the ship to see if Scotty has phasers, and luckily he still does. The readings are getting weaker, says Spock. Spock thinks aloud Kirk's plan. You can weaken Vol further by attacking his shields.
The problem, though, is that it's very possible that Vol has been leaving on his things so that when the dinner bell rings, he's got dinner on his jacket when the dinner bell rings. Experimental Vol, salivating Vol, good Vol, waiting for the dinner bell to do the bell thing. Dinner bell ring.
Sorry.
I don't want a pizza. I don't want a piece of pita brittle. I don't want a pear. I don't want a bagel.
Or a bag of beef or a beer.
I just want a big pile of flowers. Waiting for the dinner bell to do the bell thing. Dinner bell ring.
Waiting for the dinner bell to do the bell thing. Dinner bell ring. I've been leaving on my things. So in the morning when the morning birds sing.
Okay, sorry. Scotty calls for Vol. Whoops. Scotty fires on Vol. That's what I mean.
He's just getting the engine room. Ball!
It's like Kirk yelling Khan in Wrath of Khan.
Exactly.
Okay, third time. Scott fires on Vol. The energy shields weaken. Vol then calls for a storm? Wouldn't this weaken him more, I wondered? phasers continue. And then that firework goes off in its mouth. It's like a sparkler. I don't know what it's doing. But then the eyes go dark. Scotty ceases fire. Then we get a shot of a blue sky as the clouds clear, which is weird because the sky behind Vol is red. Whatever. Scotty then tells us that the antimatter pods are working again and engineering is working on the rest of the circuits. A little later. The circuits, exactly. A little later, the villagers are gathered in front of what was once Vol. Kirk stands there and lets them know that they can do it. This is what we call freedom, he says. I'm just waiting for somebody to go, sounds awful.
Yeah, exactly. So I could just imagine him standing in 1995 Russia, right? Mm-hmm. Listen, you've been liberated from your Soviet, oppression, and now everything will be wonderful. Okay, we're leaving now. Bye.
Good luck to you.
It's going to take a little bit longer to figure out how to do that. You're going to have to build a bunch of rules, and so one of the things that's missing from Star Trek is the idea of emergent order, right? That orders evolve naturally over a long period of time, right? And that the Federation has the benefit of all these separate planets that have separately evolved a kind of, ethos that works in harmony with each other to create this federation. And they can, share and intermix and so forth. But every one of them has stuff like on Earth, you've got the common law system in which judges and juries figured out who was in the wrong and what should be done if a tree falls on another guy's piece of property and breaks something, right? Yeah. You go, well, the tree was on my land, and I didn't make it fall. It was a storm or it was the wind, but it was my tree, and am I responsible? And, well, how well did you make it? So it works all this stuff out, and this stuff happens over time, trial and error. It emerges through all these different processes. And what we're doing is we're kind of beaming down, going, well, we've just turned off your computer, and you've had no time to emerge any kind of how to figure out. So who apparently is it appropriate to kiss and who not to kiss? We haven't worked that out, but we're leaving. We've given you kissing. Goodbye.
Exactly.
There'll be all kinds of inappropriate kissing going on. And what'll happen is they're like, oh my God, the kissing is out of control. We got to ban kissing.
Do you think if this was a Next Generation episode that we would have heard something like, but don't worry, the Federation is going to be sending you someone to help you grow your...
A team of Deltons will be sent.
Yeah, or something. I don't know if the Deltons would be the best help. They'd be like, no, more kissing. You should have more kissing.
That's right. I don't know. Betazoids? Who should we send?
Yeah. I just somehow think that there would have been a thing like, hey, we're going to help you build your society, not just like, hey, figure it out for yourselves. Bye.
Bye.
Maybe we find out later that it was what happened on this planet that sets up that little commission.
That's exactly right. And, but you do get much more of a sense in the original series that this is Captain Cook, right? Yeah. You're in the Pacific, you show up, you give alcohol to someone on Fiji. I'm going to switch to my islands now. Things don't work out well. You're like, okay, well, we got to go because I'm supposed to explore the whole Pacific, not stay here and help you get through your, alcohol problems. Bye. Whereas Next Generation is kind of much more like, I don't know, like after World War II and like America's going to Marshall Plan or the Federation's going to Marshall Plan its way, through problems. Oh, did we contaminate this, culture? Fine, we're going to send teams to solve the problem. This feels good in Captain Cookie.
That's my favorite cereal. I like Captain Cookie. Kirk goes on to say...
chocolate chips.
Chocolate chip Captain Cookie. like the peanut butter Captain Cookie better. Kirk goes on to say, plus you'll learn about what men and women are supposed to be like. You'll learn about love. You'll like it. Which then brought up the question, is there enough genetic material here to keep these people going on into the future? Just curious. There's only like 18 people there, it seems like. I don't know if that's enough.
18's not enough. You need like 50.
Yeah. Maybe there are more on the planet elsewhere.
Hope so. You got a planet with 18 people?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You're like, this is messed up. Ball did not plan ahead. He did not plan for his own destruction.
Right. Kirk then mentions children again. And then the two in front who are making out, the younger couple, are like, what are children?
Oh, you'll find out. Bye!
Exactly. Exactly. I was like, that sounds awful too. And then it was funny because that couple, what the couple does, what you just did, they just start laughing like, oh, yeah, I don't know what we're laughing at, but it's funny.
We're nervous. This is nervous laughter. This is funny laughter.
I guess we're just at the end of the episode. I guess that's what that really means. Oh, but it's not the end, because then we see Kirk climbing out of the Jeffries tube that he was, just like at the beginning of Muck Time. Kirk and Spock find... sorry. Kirk finds Spock and Bones continuing their argument, which is fun because this isn't a dinner or in the rec room, like someplace where they accidentally meet. It's in the hallway. So, it's just like, hey, we're two buddies just hanging out in the hallway talking to each other, which is great.
They were all working. They were all like walking down the hallway, the three of them. And Kirk's like, wait a minute. I got to go check something. And he crawls into a pipe. And the other guy.
I don't want to hear any more of this argument. I'm done.
And the other guy's like, where the hell did the captain go? I don't know. So what's for dinner tonight? It's a replica. You can get whatever you want. That thing on the planet, it's still bothering me. I think the people should have been X. No, the people should have been Y. Captain's down there. Oh, yeah, this Jeffrey tube's in excellent condition.
Got those circuits working.
That's right. These gears and circuits are in great condition. Someone is oiling the machine.
Right, exactly. Well, much like I was excited about Spock inviting Bones to be part of a Muck Time, I like it when there are these little things of friendship that we see in between them.
Mm-hmm.
Ship that. So anyway, they're back to debating about what happened on the planet. Spock brings up Genesis and Adam and Eve being cast out of paradise. Have we not done the same thing to these people? Spock asks. To which Kirk responds with, are you casting me in the role of Satan? Is there anyone else on board who looks like Satan? He continues. Spock stands there for a minute trying to regain his dignity, stands up straight and says, I don't know anyone who fits that description. Well, that is the end of the episode. Dun, dun, dun. So sad times that they were hoping that they were going to be able to shoot this episode in only 5 days, but sadly, it took 6 3/4 days to finish. Add in all those lightning bolts and phaser beams that ran the optical bill up to $35,000. That's a total hit from start to finish. This episode ended up costing us $205,000. Oh no. That means the second season deficit has grown over $137,000. Dun, dun, dun. Desilu is bleeding out. Doesn't sound good.
Quick, sell.
Oh, yeah. So in the ratings, we got CBS's Gomer Pyle, and then the first half hour of the Friday night movie, which won the night with 40% of the take. However, Star Trek took both 8:30 and the 9 o'clock slots, taking 24% of the share, beating out Hondo on ABC. Well, that is that. That is the end of this episode. I think I covered everything I wanted to cover. Everything you wanted to cover, sir?
Yep, you got it all.
Great. I just realized I don't know what the next episode is, so let me look that up real quick. By the way, today I posted on our Instagram page. It's a picture of Kor with his big gold sash, and then I put next to it a picture of Worf with his, and I wrote, "Who wore it better?" To which I then responded with, although I'm actually partial to the beer, but that's just. I wrote, Matt likes Chewie's bandolier best, but he's a Star Wars fan, so we don't listen to him. Pretty good. All right. Open up.
And we've got Han has like a mini bandolier. He can put like 3 cartridges in his little pocket thing right there.
Is best.
Yeah. I never see him use those things, so I don't know what they are. They can't be very useful. If they were using them all the time.
Actually, it's funny because in Star Wars Rebels, we actually see the Imperials using those cylinders as like key cards.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
So
there's some sort of
like the Falcon?
Yeah, the keys to the Falcon, exactly. Oh, Mirror is next.
Ah. We were just talking about it.
That's right. Well, that's exciting. Come back next week. We've got Mirror happening. That's a really fun, exciting episode. Oddly enough, we were just talking about it. So yay, we get more fun. Coming next week, we get some dual Kirk, dual Spock action going on, plus the episode that spawned not only a bunch of stuff in DS9, but of course a bunch of stuff in Discovery Season 1, which I'm sure will bleed right into Season 2, which probably by this point you have all seen, but we have not yet seen yet. There's also been a fun run on some of the comics dealing with like what would a next generation mirror universe look like, which I've been reading some of, and that has also been fun. Want to catch up some more on that because I'm sure that's going to be great times as well.
Share some details.
And, what?
What's it like in the
share details
in the next generation mirror universe?
I thought I shared some of this before, but I'll go ahead and do it again. And if I have, I'll just cut it. So obviously the war against the opposing side has not been going well for the Federation, but Kirk is currently the captain of, what was his former ship?
Picard, the Stargazer.
Stargazer, yeah. I had a G in my brain, but I didn't know why. So he's the captain of the Stargazer, and Tasha Yar is his second in command. And you really think in the first part of the comic that it's going to be Yar who's going to kill Picard, but surprisingly, it ends up being Barclay who kills Yar, and so he becomes very esteemed in Picard's thing. So Picard comes up with this plan, and he's just like, I know that if I were to take the Enterprise, that I would, win this war straight out. It's the most, most importantly, it's the only one of its kind. It's the best ship in the fleet, and if I were to take it from Captain Jellicoe, I know that I would win this war, but I can't do it alone. And so he calls Geordi, who, with his engineering fake girlfriend, but in this one the real girlfriend, has been building the Enterprise. So he gets him on board, but then he has to go get Riker. He's like, I can't do this without Riker. So he goes and he literally fights Riker in a bar and beats him, of course. And then Riker's like, all right, what do you want? And so then they set up the plan to steal the Enterprise. And so that's how the first 4 or 5 issues run.
Because that makes any sense.
What do you mean?
That Picard would defeat Riker in a bar fight?
Oh, well, no, yeah. Well, it's also it's funny in this world too. He's like super buff, Yeah, it's silly, but it's fun. There's also something with Crusher with both Wesley and Beverly. You can definitely tell that there's been a romantic situation between Beverly and Picard that has gone bad. And then Wesley pretends to be like this idiot kid, but really he's like the smartest, person in all of Starfleet. It's that kind of thing. It's fun. Maybe I'll talk more about it next week. We'll see. Anyway, well, that wraps it up for this week. What fun. We talked more about this episode. I say this a lot. We talked more about this episode than I thought we would, so that's great. Although I did have a lot of notes, so that's also good. The recap on this one was also fun. Next week, Mirror, what have I mentioned? Follow us on the Instagrams because I'm always posting really dumb, stupid, funny stuff on that. Plus, we got our website to really check about. We're going to be on YouTube all the time and SoundCloud and iTunes. We're all over the place. So anywhere you might be looking, we're probably there. Come find us. Also on Facebook, so we got a fun little group going there as well where we post all the interesting news of things that are going on. And I think that's it. I'm Matt saying goodbye. In Houston, say goodbye, Ken.
Peace and long life.
As always, great. And we will see everybody next week.